After being married for a year, I got pregnant. I decided to surprise my husband by visiting his company during lunch break, but instead, I saw him embracing another woman tightly. I hesitated by the door, feeling like an imposter compared to the woman who looked exactly like me, who was his true wife. Back at our apartment with Eric, my husband, my twin sister Emily, who looked exactly like me, called me urgently as Eric had a work event until 10 p.m. She insisted we swap places while he was out. Ignoring my protests, she urged me to open the door as she stood outside with 2 large suitcases, looking exhausted. Emily barged in, leaving the suitcases for me to handle. Due to my pregnancy, I struggled to lift them. She scolded me, claiming I had become weaker after marrying Eric. She emphasized that she was Eric's true wife, and that I should not forget that. While I struggled with the suitcases, feeling weak from my pregnancy, Emily made herself comfortable, sipping wine on the sofa. She mocked me for being inexperienced in handling men compared to her, a nightclub owner who believed all men were the same, fond of money, seeking excitement, and infidelity. I ignored her and checked the time, realizing Eric would be home in 4 hours. Emily observed my actions and urged me to hurry and pack up before Eric returned and discovered the switch we had made. Feeling conflicted about our situation, I struggled to decide what belongings to take with me. After a simple packing session, I left behind items I couldn't take and decided to give them to Emily. We exchanged identification, and I called Bella, who offered me a ride in her red Jaguar. Bella, a straightforward person and the owner of a car dealership, assisted me in loading the luggage into the trunk before we headed out for late-night food. During the car ride, Bella criticized me for my submissive behavior towards others, jokingly calling me a saint. I diverted the conversation by mentioning my hunger and requesting to go eat. Bella agreed, but warned me I might regret it, hinting at the complex dynamics among the 3 of us. I reflected on my background, being raised by a poor widow, and having to mature early to support the family financially. With no resolution in sight for our complicated situation involving Eric and Emily, I felt powerless. The sudden intrusion by Emily had left me confused and vulnerable, as Eric's love always belonged to her, the woman he married. I was just the outsider in their relationship. Recalling a past incident where a woman at a hot pot restaurant had attacked me, I realized how my past struggles had shaped me. Despite my tough exterior, I still grappled with the uncertainty of how to navigate the tangled relationships among us. When the words fell, her obese body lunged at me, with consecutive slapping sounds echoing in the noisy and bustling restaurant. She put all her strength into it, hitting me hard, her face fierce like a beast ready to devour, saliva flying out of her mouth. You seduced my husband, came to my house showing off, took my son away. My left and right cheeks burned from the slaps. My head was dizzy and I couldn't tell which way was which anymore. I even felt a chunk of my hair being ripped off by her, my scalp stinging with pain. The onlookers in the restaurant formed a circle around us, pointing and whispering. The manager and a group of people rushed over to pull us apart. Don't touch me. Anyone who touches me, I'll hit them too. I'm telling you to let go of me. Are you deaf? Several burly men managed to stop the furious woman from attacking me, and with the help of a female colleague, I slowly managed to stand up. But that woman's eyes kept burning on me. I raised my head, suppressed my grievances, and told her, "You've got it wrong. I'm not a homewrecker." The woman disdainfully chuckled. "I will remember that face of yours even if it turns to ashes." The manager came over and asked me about the woman's accusations, but I shook my head. "Bitch, you're still trying to argue. Have you no shame?" As she was about to come and hit me, she was stopped by the staff. To avoid disrupting the business in the restaurant, the manager tried to reason with the woman. "This meal, consider it on the house for our restaurant. We're running a small business, and it's not easy. Can you please stop causing trouble here? Do I look like I need your money?" The woman crossed her arms, looking disdainfully at everyone. The manager lowered his voice, "Then leave." The woman dragged a chair and sat down rudely. "I'm not leaving today." With the manager in a dilemma, he eventually turned his gaze towards me, the expression clear as day. "Manager," I looked at him with red eyes. The woman stood up arrogantly, looked at the manager, and said, "I've lost my appetite for this meal, but I don't want to see this woman next time I come." The manager nodded and bowed, saying yes. Before leaving, he didn't forget to tell me, "Don't think this is over, you just wait." The next day, during the settlement and dismissal, the manager gave me an extra month's salary, patting my shoulder and saying, "Young and grounded, what's wrong with that? You always want shortcuts and easy ways." I looked up suddenly, my eyes reddened. "You all don't believe me, do you?" The manager didn't want to say more, making an excuse to leave. Distracted, I returned home, only to find my luggage and some belongings thrown outside the front door. My front door was wide open, and there were noises coming from inside. The landlady was standing at the door with my picture frame in her hand. As soon as I grabbed the frame, I asked her why. "I've paid this month's rent in full. Why are you kicking me out?" The landlady looked embarrassed and finally told me the truth after my repeated questioning. In the morning, a woman with a group of fierce-looking strong men blocked my door, telling me not to rent the house to you, otherwise, they would demolish my house. I have a family of 5, all relying on me for support. I can't afford to offend them. "You can't blame me either." I chuckled. "You could call the police, couldn't you?" The landlady avoided my gaze. Her voice low like a mosquito. She gave me money. In the face of money, there's no reasoning to discuss. I sighed. "At least let me stay for tonight. At least give me a buffer. Time to find another place to live." The landlady didn't care about me. Fearing trouble for herself, she took a few steps forward, grabbed my hand, and begged. "I can't afford to offend those people. Can you move out tonight?" Before I could respond, the landlady let go of my hand and quickly left, leaving only her retreating figure. That night, it rained heavily, and I carried a large suitcase and a picture frame, walking in the rain. Seeking shelter at a bus stop, the nearby street lights flickered, the wings of the flying ants were wet, but they still clung tightly to the dim light bulbs, clinging to the last trace of warmth and faint light. The only refuge I could find was a hospital, where I lay beside my grandmother's sickbed for the night. That woman really messed up my life. The hospital, which had been accommodating, now moved my grandmother's bed to the corridor, because I couldn't pay the medical bills on time. With people coming and going in the corridor, the noisy voices, and my grandmother's preference for peace and quiet, it was impossible to recover well. Of course, I disagreed and went to the doctor's office to reason with them. The result was me being threatened. If I caused any more trouble, my grandmother couldn't even stay at the hospital. My grandmother touched my hair and smiled, saying, "Lily, it's all right. Grandma is not that delicate." But no matter how undemanding she was, the medical bills still had to be paid. At that time, with poor job opportunities and lacking education, it was difficult for me to find a job. So, as long as it paid quickly, I took on some dirty and tiring work. That day, after delivering bottled water to a residential area, I squatted on the sidewalk, eating bread with bottled water. A pair of red high heels suddenly caught my eye without warning, and when I looked up, I was stunned. It was only when I stood up that she extended a hand, smiling gracefully. "Nice to meet you, your twin sister Emily." We sat in a cafe, and as we chatted, Emily sat across from me, took off her sunglasses, revealing her refined and elegant makeup. As the conversation reached its conclusion, she seemed to have the upper hand. "Only I can help you get rid of that woman." I took the blame for baseless accusations in her place, but she told me she was my savior. But for the expensive surgery for my grandmother, I was willing to take this loss. Indeed, we were real biological sisters, born on the same day and identified in black and white. As for why we were separated, it all started 20-something years ago. Our biological mother was born in a coastal town. She was beautiful, and several young single men in town pursued her, but she only had eyes for a rogue on the street. When she unintentionally became pregnant, our mother went to the rogue's house to demand responsibility. A dilapidated house with a wall-to-wall emptiness, no hooligans in sight. They ran away fearing responsibility long ago. In that era, in that close-minded town, getting pregnant before marriage would surely invite gossip and judgment. Those vulgar words made my grandmother sigh with exasperation, wondering why she had such a daughter. Just when my mother was about to drown in spit and prepare for an abortion, a passing worn-down merchant from the sea took a fancy to her at first sight. He didn't mind the child in her belly, was willing to marry her, and then took my mother away from that small town. Unbeknownst to me, my mother gave birth to twins, but the merchant couldn't afford them both, so he said he could only take one. Since birth, I've been different from my sister. I'm thin while she's chubby. Considering the pros and cons, my mother abandoned me at an orphanage and took my sister with her. She told me that our parents had long passed away, and we had lost contact with relatives, so we only had each other to rely on. She did treat me well for a while, but it was not without a motive. Emily was the owner of a nightclub, with many wealthy backers behind her. When her nightclub faced closure after her fifth backer grew tired of her, Eric's appearance ignited a glimmer of hope for her. Being smart, this time she didn't intend to handle it herself, so she went out of her way to find me to be her replacement, so that after earning money, she wouldn't have to take responsibility. Of course, I was unaware of all this, and if I had known, I would have definitely disagreed. I remember that day. She cried her heart out, her makeup smudged all over her face. "But I have infertility, even if I were to marry him. I would be looked down upon by his family. To spare his feelings, he would surely have conflicts with his family. But now, if I break up with him, it could affect his career. It is critical now, and I can't ruin it for him. So, wiping away her tears, she looked at me with her eyes filled with tears and said, "Could you, please, spend some time with him instead of my sister until I sort out my emotions? I will explain to him later." At that moment, despite pitying her, I had my principles and straightforwardly refused. Upon hearing my refusal, she didn't insist, just lowered her head, her voice choked with emotion. "It was my mistake, and this matter should not have involved you." Later, when I learned the truth, all I could say was that Emily was a great actress, playing out unfounded emotions as if they were real. That day, Emily suddenly asked me to accompany her to her workplace, the nightclub. When she pushed me into a group of men, and I was harassed. Eric, in casual white attire, leaned on the railing on the second floor, looking down at the group of drunkards. "My woman, how dare you touch her?" His voice, even amidst the noisy nightclub, was still commanding. That night, the full moon hung in the sky, stars twinkling, and I sat on a curb, tears brimming in my eyes. Eric crouched in front of me, his long legs crossed. Facing me, he seemed a bit awkward, not the same air people feared in the nightclub. Taking a deep breath, I seemed to still be recovering from the shock. Eric, squatting in front of me, hesitated to hold my hand. After patting my hand a few times, he hesitated for a few seconds before thrusting his sleeve towards me. "Forget to bring tissue, if you don't mind, use my sleeve to wipe." Meeting his dumbfounded yet intense gaze, I smiled inexplicably. After a short moment, I pushed his hand away. "Your clothes are expensive. I can't afford to ruin them." "Who said you have to pay?" "I'm willingly doing it." He blushed, fearing making me uncomfortable, rapidly explaining. "I mean, this shirt was only $9.90 online, not worth much." I used my sleeve to dab at the corner of my eye, telling him, "Do you want to be friends with me? I have no friends in this city, so a little warmth is enough for me to surrender." He was taken aback for a moment, then nodded vigorously, his eyes bright, looking like a handsome man, but acting like a blockhead. I had no idea he was Eric. Emily purposely didn't tell me. To Eric, I was known as Emily, so we were acquaintances, no need to mention names. It wasn't until the second time, when he invited me out for a meal and drinks, that I realized I still didn't know his name. "What's your name?" I'm embarrassed that I don't even know the name of my savior. His slender fingers tapped the steering wheel, his smile charming. To my confused question, he answered without surprise. "Eric," he said. The mole at the corner of his eye hidden under thick lashes, combined with a smile that never left his face, held a hint of charm, excessively good-looking. But at that moment, I was not in the mood to admire. I pondered, acknowledging Emily's cunning tactics, because Eric really was the type of person that once you got to know him, you would be drawn in by his charismatic personality. Every time I saw him, I looked forward to the next meeting. So, I fell for the trap. With ulterior motives, I kept agreeing to meet him time and again. Eric was truly kind, so good that I started feeling envious of Emily, marveling at how she managed to have such a great man by her side. That day, in excruciating pain from menstrual cramps, rolling around the bed, Eric found out by accident. He was away on a business trip, but a few hours later, he appeared at the door of the temporary house I rented. Sweat covered his smooth forehead. Gasping for breath, leaning on the door frame, he uttered, "Do you know how worried you made me?" I lived in a rundown old housing area with 20 floors, and I resided on the 18th floor. The elevator was often out of order, and that day it happened to be under repair. So he ran up all those flights of stairs. I quickly helped him into the house, pouring him a glass of water, reminding him to drink slowly. I told him, "Silly, period cramps won't kill me." Standing up and sitting on his lap, I pinched his nose. "Moreover, now that you're here, my cramps won't ease anyway." Eric helps massage my stomach, acting like a spoiled child. I ignore him. "In the future, I need to be notified when your aunt is in pain." When I didn't respond, he pinched the soft flesh on my stomach and dissatisfiedly said, "Can you hear me?" I hooked his neck and leaned against his warm chest. We hugged each other for a long time on the sofa, in the quiet room, only our breaths entwined. Occasionally, the wall clock chimed on time, and we realized it was already late. At this point, I would lightly tap him and say, "Eric, being with you really takes up a lot of time." He didn't care about my complaint, sniffed my scent, and said leisurely, "How much is your time worth? I'll buy it." When Eric and I got married, Emily found a girl to represent her to negotiate the bride price with Eric. She asked for 10 million upfront. Eric, who was used to the ups and downs of the workplace, had seen such high demands before. I was so shocked that I couldn't even hold the coffee cup steady, Pretending to be calm, I said to the strange girl, "This is too unreasonable." Unexpectedly, Eric gently held my hand, remained calm and composed, without any ripples on his face. "Apart from the 10 million, what about the commercial property in the city center? As far as I know, the seaside house in the commercial district is worth 50 million. My trembling hand was held by Eric, his thumb gently rubbing it, as if soothing me. The unfamiliar girl had been instilled by Emily to extort as much money as possible, so she was almost grinning and forgot to play her part. Eric remained generous. "The money will be transferred tomorrow, and I will have my assistant handle the paperwork for the house." Eric took my hand and stood up, his voice becoming colder. "But I have one request. I don't want any more interactions between you and my wife like this in the future." The unfamiliar girl didn't care at all. She just needed to convey the message verbatim to Emily to get a substantial amount of money. Then she could live carefree and happy. In the car, with light music playing, Eric massaged his temples, leaned back in his seat, and closed his eyes to relax. I, on the other hand, felt like sitting on pins and needles, afraid that Eric would look down on me because of this, realizing that my family member was a money grubber, afraid that he would think my character was the same, afraid of disappointing him. After a few seconds of contemplation, I stared at his handsome profile, softly speaking in a voice that was unusual for me. "Eric." He made a soft sound in response, but didn't look at me. Summoning up my courage, I swallowed my saliva and continued, "Eric." This time, he simply ignored me, and I suddenly burst into tears, more fiercely than I had anticipated. "Eric, I'm not as good as you imagine. Do you regret it? Regret marrying me?" Tears began to flow uncontrollably. Eric suddenly opened his eyes, looking flustered, moved closer to me, wiped away my tears, and comforted me. "Everything's fine. Why are you crying when I didn't say anything?" "But you," I choked up, never realizing I had such a melodramatic side to me, feeling extremely uncomfortable. "But you're angry with me." He sighed, tightened his arms slightly, and pulled me into his embrace, his faint and refreshing breath entering my nostrils. "I'm not angry with you. I just feel sorry for you." I frowned in confusion. "Before, you mentioned that you have a sister who you didn't grow up with, only recently reunited. I just didn't expect her to be so materialistic, and you stayed with her for a while. How could someone like that genuinely care for you?" I understood that Eric thought that for Emily, I was just a bargaining chip for money, lacking genuine affection. For no reason, my nose felt even more sour. I wanted to find some paper to wipe my tears. I pushed the person in front of me, but he didn't budge. "Eric, if you don't let go of me, my snot and tears will end up on your clothes." Instead of letting me go, the person in front of me held me even tighter, affectionately calling me wife. I subconsciously responded, "What's wrong?" Afterwards, I realized what had happened, my face blushing and heart racing. His short, stiff hair brushed against my neck, and he seemed very happy. "I always find you helping me save money. Remember at the nightclub when you said the shirt was expensive and couldn't be used to wipe snot?" I smirked as he relaxed a bit, pushed him away, grabbed a few tissues from the console, wiped my nose and said, "This time is different." I said the next sentence softly, "Because this time, I want to wash it for you." The person beside me didn't make a sound. Just those beautiful eyes blinked without moving away from me. "What about you?" I just looked up when a shadow descended over me. Eric's relentless kiss touched my lips without warning, holding the back of my head and tasting the sweetness of my lips with intensity. His tongue delved into an unprecedented depth, sucking away all the oxygen in my mouth, leaving me intoxicated. I gripped his white shirt with all my strength, feeling like drowning in an endless sea, searching for a final support. After a moment, exhausted, I collapsed into his arms. Shivering all over, breathless, I surrendered, whispering, "Eric." Eric finally let go of me, his breath falling on my neck, his deep and husky voice reaching through my ear bones. "You don't need to wash it, but I like it. I like this side of you." "What side of me?" "The one who speaks sweet words." After we got married, I went to see Emily to ask her to return the money to Eric, but to my surprise, she turned me away. The bowl of beef noodles was placed in front of me quite rudely. Bella sat opposite me, with a weird attitude, saying, "Someone has been saying it's okay." Then she looked sulky and tore open the package of disposable chopsticks, putting them on the bowl. "Why don't you eat? Denying yourself oil and salt for 3 days. Are you trying to starve yourself?" I forced a smile, covering my belly with my hand, saying, "I'll eat now." After taking a bite, my stomach churned, a wave of nausea rising to my head. I pushed the chair away, turned my head, and ran to the bathroom. Later, the sound of vomiting came from the bathroom, making Bella worryingly leaning against the door frame. "Is the nausea so bad that you need to see a doctor?" Bella asked. I shook my head, sitting weakly on the carpet, I just need to rest for a while. Bella, suddenly irritable, threatened, if you keep going like this, even if I have to, I'll bring Eric here in front of you. I weakly smiled, looking at her, confident. You won't. With a slam of the door, Bella said, watch me. After a light sigh, I said, why bother like this? You can tell Eric the truth. Whether it's life or death, it's better than being a walking corpse like you are now. Others don't understand. Do I not understand? Eric hates being lied to the most. Once I make things clear, maybe he'll ask me to have an abortion. This child is a gift from God. And it's also the last memory between Eric and me. I can't take that risk. A few days later, Emily contacted me again. Just as I got off the bus stop, someone grabbed me and led me through twisted alleys to a dead end. When she let go of my hand, she looked around nervously at the mouth of the alley, a ginger cat pouncing from the eaves and startling her. No one followed. Even though I didn't know what she was so nervous about, I instinctively said, no one followed you here. She let out a breath of relief and then asked, did you and Eric break up before I arrived? No, what's wrong? I almost didn't hesitate, because that morning we were in bed, entwined and intimate. That's strange. She paused for a moment and continued, after you left that day, I waited for him in the room in my pajamas until 10 o'clock. When he came back, he seemed very drunk. I wanted to help him undress and bathe, but he yelled at me loudly and told me not to touch him. Drunk? Although Eric wasn't on the list of 10 CEOs with stomach problems, drinking alcohol can be harmful. Whenever I smelled strong alcohol on him, I'd be angry with him for a day and wouldn't let him into my room. Later, he almost stopped drinking altogether, but he couldn't avoid social drinking. I found it acceptable as long as he didn't get drunk. It might be because he's been stressed about work recently and not in a good mood, I suggested. Maybe, she said doubtfully, but since that day, he hasn't come home and has been staying at the office. Well, maybe it's just a phase. Emily looked at me, not hiding the sarcasm in her words about the husband preferring to stay in the office than come home. 8 or 9 times out of 10, he's tired of his wife at home. Before I could respond, she cut me off and said, all right. I have a sense of propriety. Let's talk next time. She turned around, glanced around the alley entrance, and walked out. My intuition told me that she was probably in trouble. I just didn't expect things to escalate so quickly. On the weekend, I bought a fish at the market to make soup and nourish myself. Just as I left the crowded market, I noticed someone following me. I planned to zigzag through the streets to lose them, but they didn't give me a chance. They were following me closely, and there was no way to shake them off. With that thought, my back suddenly felt cold. As the footsteps behind me got closer, as if a hand was about to reach out, I collided with someone head-on. As I looked up, he wrapped his body around mine and led me into a deep alley. Eric's palm was on the back of my head, and I buried my head in his rhythmic chest. I stayed like that, nestled in his arms, savoring the familiar scent. I faintly heard the hurried and chaotic footsteps outside, followed by a few curses, and then all was silent. The person above didn't say a word, so I didn't dare move. After a while, he said, okay, they're gone. Blushing, I moved away from him and took a few steps back, still thinking about what to do next. After a few seconds, Eric asked, why were they following you? I looked up at his piercing eyes and stammered, I don't know. I didn't know why, but I felt afraid. He had never looked at me with such eyes before. You haven't offended anyone. Do they need to follow you so intensely? Eric's tone contained anger and unusual aggression. Shrugging my shoulders, I trembled with fear, took a quick glance at him. As expected, his face turned red with anger. After we got married, we rarely argued, and most of the time, it was just me complaining. For example, Eric, you're a pervert for washing my underwear. Eric, I can't believe it. You can't hang pantyhose on the drying rack properly. I'm warning you, Eric, you can't kiss me without permission. I'd be the one to scold, and he'd be the one to comfort. Now, I couldn't tell if Eric didn't like Emily anymore, or if he didn't like me pretending to be Emily. A feeling of frustration rose from my heart, stuck in my throat, unable to utter a word for a long time. Forget it, he said. I'll have my assistant take you home. No, it's okay. I can go home by myself. I quickly waved my hand to refuse, but then worried it might arouse suspicion and added, I have something else to do later, so no need to bother the assistant. Eric glanced silently at the fish in my handbag, then took a step out, walking away coldly with a final remark, as you wish. Stunned, I stood there and couldn't digest Eric's cold and distant attitude towards me. My phone buzzed in my pocket several times before I answered it. I just wanted to let you know, Eric and I are getting a divorce. So, don't be surprised if you see him and silly call him your husband. Emily's voice came through the phone, neither loud nor soft, but enough to leave me speechless. Now it made sense. Eric's attitude was just a way of showing displeasure upon meeting his ex-wife. Before she hung up, I hastily asked, "Why are you getting a divorce from him?" Emily chuckled on the phone. "Who knows, it was his idea." I said, "Okay, give me 50 million, and I'll leave." With a thud, my fish fell to the ground. 50 million, when we got married. Didn't I give you a lot of money? Why do you dare to ask him for more? I was shaking with anger. In that moment, I knew that the beautiful image Eric had worked so hard to maintain crumbled because of Emily. "Why are you so harsh? I thought of you and left you half, as your hard work fee for the past 2 years. And besides, he's so wealthy. I didn't even ask him to split the post-marriage property, and it was his own idea. I didn't force him." Emily spoke convincingly, and I took a deep breath and asked her, "What about the money I gave you before?" But she suddenly fell silent, no sound. "I'm asking you a question," I almost shouted. "With things as they are now, tell me, what did you do with that money?" "I lost it in gambling," she said. Her tone softened. "So, you didn't come back this time to be with Eric, but to get his money, right?" I suppressed my anger and asked calmly. "I had no choice. Those creditors were hounding me every other day. They said if I didn't pay up soon, they'd send me to jail." Emily's tone softened a bit. "Lily, you wouldn't watch me go to jail, would you?" I didn't want to hear more. I hung up the phone, threw the fish that had dirtied the floor into the trash can. The wind blew on my face, but no matter how it blew, it couldn't blow away the crimson at the corner of my eye. Everything became clear. The time in the alley, Emily's panic was because she was avoiding creditors. And the people who were following me just now, their target was Emily, mistaking me for her, because we looked so similar. After Emily sold the house Eric gave her, she took the money and went to an underground casino to gamble. At first, her luck was good. She only made profits and no losses, but those who dabbled in such things were consumed by greed, and once greed took hold, it would cling to them. So, no matter how much money she had, it couldn't withstand her squandering. After taking a few steps on the street, I suddenly bent over, clutching my stomach tightly. The intense pain radiated from my abdomen, making my teeth chatter. Dizzy, I nearly passed out. Where was the pregnant woman's husband, to sign some documents? The sound of a chair being pushed back abruptly from beside the bed. To my surprise, it was Bella's voice. "What kind of husband is he? His wife almost had a miscarriage, and he didn't come to see her." When I opened my eyes, I saw an elderly nurse expressing her dissatisfaction, not far away. My best friend saw me waking up and rushed over to help me. "You fainted on the side of the road, and a kind person notified your sister through the last contact person in your hand. Your sister didn't pick up, so the call was forwarded to me." I groaned and glanced unconsciously out the door. Bella poured me a glass of water and handed it to me. "I didn't dare to notify him, but if you want." "I don't want to," I interrupted her. "My sister told me that she and Eric are divorced." Bella took the empty cup from my hand. "So, what's your plan next?" The warm water relieved my dry throat a bit. I cleared my throat and found my voice. "Find my sister. Make her spit out the money from her mouth. Eric doesn't owe her." Bella quickly understood and said helplessly, "But Eric owes you. Owes your child in your belly a father's love." The doctor said my baby's heartbeat was unstable and needed to be observed in the hospital for a few days. Looking out the window of the ward, I saw the dried white poplar shooting out tender shoots, and the sound of frogs croaking in the pond. The cold, desolate winter had finally ended under the bright, sunny day. Counting the days, the baby would be born in the summer. Thinking about it, I had gotten out of bed and was planning to take a walk in the yard, but as soon as I stepped out of the ward, I froze in my tracks. Around the corner, Eric leaned against the wall, with cold eyes and eyebrows slightly furrowed, holding a cigarette between his fingertips. Half of the ash fell on his trouser leg. Under the swirling smoke, I couldn't clearly see his expression. I instinctively prepared to escape, but he caught me just in time. "Wait." Well, he didn't bother to call me by name, but if he had called out Emily's name, I would probably have felt even sadder and more pathetic. Forced to turn back, I smiled and said, "What a coincidence." He extinguished the cigarette in the trash can and walked over quickly, his brow barely visibly furrowed. "What's wrong? Weren't you fine when you left?" he asked, concerned about Emily. "It's just a stomach ache from eating something bad," I explained softly. He furrowed his brow deeper, whether deliberately or not. His fair, slender fingertips reached toward my stomach. I dodged away like a rabbit with its fur on end, and his hand remained there awkwardly. Afterward, he withdrew his hand and put it in his pocket, seeming self-deprecating. "Sorry, I forgot we were divorced long ago." Realizing that my actions were indeed too extreme, but still better than being seen through by him suspiciously. "And what about you? "What are you doing at the hospital?" I asked him. Eric said casually, "There's an old man in my family in the hospital." The old man Eric mentioned should be his grandfather, as he had mentioned him before, and our marriage wouldn't have gone so smoothly if it hadn't been for his grandfather doing Eric's father's job. However, the reasonable grandfather did not appear at our wedding. According to Eric's explanation, he went to his grandmother's hometown to pay his respects. Perhaps he went to tell his grandmother that his grandson was getting married. Thinking this, I couldn't help but say without thinking, "Can I go see Grandpa?" With a missed title in my words. I didn't realize it, but Eric paused for a moment without saying anything. Seeing his expressionless face, I realized, after all, we were divorced, and maybe it was inappropriate to address him like that. I casually said, "Don't mind." I didn't mean, not mind. Eric gestured with his chin. "I'll go to room 305. You go first. I'll go downstairs to get him something." Before I could react, he circled around me, leaving behind a broad back. Since he had said so, I had no reason not to go. Just as I stepped in, a kind voice sounded. "Is that Emily?" An old man, with a long beard in the hospital bed waved at me. "Come over here to Grandpa." I hesitated for a moment before walking over. I hadn't changed my way of addressing him, obediently calling out, "Grandpa, I'm here to see you." Grandpa had seen our wedding photos with Eric, so he recognized me. Grandpa pulled me to sit down. Since I was also wearing hospital clothes, I had to explain to him. "It's nothing, Grandpa. I just urged Eric to have a baby with you soon, so I can enjoy the pleasure of having a great-grandchild in my lifetime." I wondered if Eric hadn't told his family that we were divorced, or that he was divorced from Emily. There might be a reason why he didn't tell them, but I couldn't take advantage of this title, nor did I want to deceive Grandpa. "Grandpa, actually, we're divorced," his clear voice suddenly sounded. That's when Eric appeared at the door, with his back against the door frame and holding 2 bowls of porridge. "You were just sick. Why do you have so much to say?" Eric walked towards Grandpa, but his words were directed at me. Grandpa's face fell, and he patted Eric's shoulder heavily as he bent down. "You're an idiot. Is this how you talk to your wife?" "Apologize quickly." Eric put down the porridge, rubbing his shoulder. Although he remained expressionless, I knew it must have hurt. I was standing on a stool, trying to reach for clothes blown by the wind, accidentally knocking over the stool and falling. Eric was quick to catch me as I fell, but the weight of my body landed on his left shoulder, injuring him. It had only been a couple of months since then, and with bone injury taking 100 days to heal, his injury probably hadn't fully recovered yet. "Grandpa, Eric is just joking," I laughed. "It's a little trick between us as a couple." "Is that so?" Grandpa stared at Eric, half believing and half doubting. Noticing Eric's gaze on me, I glanced at him, and he quickly lowered his eyes. "Grandpa, have the porridge while it's hot," Eric said, lifting the lid to reveal a steaming bowl of porridge, tempting even for me who had lost my appetite recently. Grandpa pushed the bowl of porridge towards me. "My daughter-in-law, you haven't eaten. Here, take this." I was about to refuse when Eric calmly said, "Grandpa, you eat yours. There's another one for me." He then opened the other bowl of porridge, which had fish and onions. I reached out to take it, saying, "Thank you." Just a moment, he moved the bowl towards his side. My eyes unconsciously followed his movement. He held the spoon in the porridge, stirring slowly and methodically. Eric had attractive hands, slender yet strong, with veins visible as he stirred the porridge. Such good-looking hands, elegant in any task he performed. "All set," he said as he held the bowl towards me with his wrist. "Here." I nervously looked away and took the bowl. Taking a mouthful, the temperature was just right. Grandpa's eyes moved back and forth between us, his face creased with a smile. Suddenly, the morning sickness struck again, and I almost rushed to the bathroom, retching uncontrollably. Feeling too sick to care about Eric, I could hear Grandpa's joyful voice. "What are you waiting for? Go check on my daughter-in-law." My morning sickness was severe, making it hard to eat. Every time I tried to eat something, I would throw it up, leading to extremely low blood sugar and fainting spells. This time was no exception. In my semi-conscious state, I could hear Eric's panicked tone, mistakenly calling me Lily. When I woke up again, Eric was nowhere to be seen, and Bella was beside my bed, complaining. "I was only gone downstairs to buy something, and you fainted. You really are something." I quickly sat up, asking if Eric knew. Bella pressed me back onto bed, tucking me in. "Don't say anything, you almost revealed the truth. I went downstairs and saw Eric carrying you, calling for help at the nurse's station. Luckily, I dashed over and took you from him, saying you had gynecological issues, so it was inconvenient for a man to accompany you." "Did he believe you?" I groaned, telling him I had stomach problems. Bella, sounding worried, said, "What should we do then?" I patted her. "It's okay. Stomach issues and gynecological problems can occur together without being contradictory." The comforting words were meant for Bella, but I was unsure and anxious. My demeanor would be a dead giveaway to anyone who had been there. Everyone would know I was pregnant. Trying to reassure myself, I thought Eric wasn't one of everyone, so he wouldn't know. Bella touched my cheek and said, "Honestly, I saw Eric's expression just now. He was very anxious. He definitely still loves you." I turned my head and smiled. Even if he still loves me, that's not Lily anymore. Luckily, despite the morning sickness, the baby in my belly was healthy. To avoid encountering Eric again, with the doctor's permission, I immediately prepared for discharge from the hospital. As the saying goes, the more you fear something, the more likely it is to happen. As I lay on the sofa reading a book about motherhood, a strange call came through. It was Eric's grandfather on the other end of the line. When I opened the car door and saw that the driver was Eric, I shouted in disbelief, "Don't stand there, come in and sit." Grandpa in the back seat patted the leather chair. I had to reluctantly get in, as Grandpa had pleaded on the phone for me to come. As the car drove off, Grandpa held my hand and started chatting. "Grandpa, where are we going to eat?" I glanced out the window and realized we were heading to the commercial area. In the rearview mirror, my eyes met Eric's in an unexpected sly way, causing my right eyelid to twitch inexplicably. What was originally just an ordinary sentence had me scared out of my wits. The restaurant we were going to was specifically designed for pregnant women, mothers in postpartum, and those preparing for pregnancy. It embraced a unique style and the theme of celebrating women's greatness, thus becoming one of the most popular dining brands in the commercial area. Stammering, I asked, "So, are we going to finish eating?" Grandpa was about to say something when Eric's cold voice interrupted, "Hospital." From Eric's lack of temperature in his tone, I couldn't figure out if he knew or didn't know. During the meal, Eric got up to go to the bathroom, and I followed him after saying something to my grandfather. When he came out from the men's restroom, I stopped him and asked, "Did you not tell Grandpa that we were getting divorced?" Eric lowered his gaze, pushed me aside, walked to the sink, turned on the tap, and spoke with an indifferent tone. "Forgot." I almost spat out a mouthful of blood. "How could you forget about this?" I asked anxiously as I approached him. Walking a couple of steps, he reached into the hand dryer, the whooshing sound making me anxious as I waited for him to speak. "Don't worry," he said. "I will tell him when he's feeling calmer." Grandpa was recently ill and couldn't handle any shocks, so I thought of stepping back. "Okay, then please do it as soon as possible," I said hurriedly. As Eric stepped back, he suddenly approached, the strong pressure making me step back continuously until my back touched the cold tiles. His gaze swept arrogantly across my face, then down to my stomach, a smirk playing on his lips. He locked eyes with me and enunciated each word, but I told Grandpa that we both are trying to have a baby. Frustrated, I pushed him away, unable to form a single coherent sentence. He took a few steps back, walking towards the door, a shameless smile on his face. "So, I'm going to disappoint you. You won't be free that easily," he said. "Has Eric changed because of his divorce from Emily?" Just as I sat back at the dinner table, Grandpa smiled warmly, putting a piece of tuna into my bowl and advising me to eat more for the baby's sake. I forced a smile and, under Grandpa's expectant gaze, slowly chewed the tuna. Meanwhile, Eric on the opposite side of the table picked up a cup of coffee and casually looked in my direction. I wondered how he could still keep calm around his ex-wife. I couldn't do it. When they mentioned the next stop was the hospital, I made up an excuse and fled. The next day, as I came out of a pharmacy, I saw a familiar Maybach parked on the side of the bustling street. The person in the car was on the phone, leaning on the windowsill with a cigarette between his slender fingers. He flicked the ash, took a deep drag, the gentle spring breeze ruffling his hair. I chuckled but was caught in the act. With his phone still at his ear, he beckoned me with a finger. I picked up my things and walked in the opposite direction. The car door slammed shut behind me, and realizing I was being chased, I quickened my pace. Eric's long strides caught up to me, and he grabbed my wrist from behind, causing me to almost fall into his arms. "Why are you running?" Eric's tone was unfriendly. I stood my ground, subtly hiding the medical bag I was carrying. "What are you holding?" He suddenly leaned in to look behind me. Nothing. I dodged his gaze, clutching the bag tightly. "Why hide it?" He reached for the bag. "Helping a colleague," I lied. "Buying folic acid for a colleague." Eric opened the bag and realized I hadn't been working since we got married. He had always insisted I only needed to be his wife, not worry about anything else. To pass the time, I had revisited my high school passion for painting, rapidly improving and eventually obtaining a certification as an illustrator. Now, I was a freelance illustrator, a fact he knew. Without letting me explain, Eric scooped me up in his arms and said, "Let's go to the hospital." As the sudden weightlessness hit me, I screamed and instinctively clung to his neck, my heart racing with panic as I screamed, "I don't want to go, put me down." Ignoring my struggles, he drove straight to the maternity hospital, and while holding the diagnosis stating I was 4 months pregnant, he yelled at me for not telling him about it sooner. Unable to meet his gaze, I felt the familiar sense of grievance creeping up again. He softened his tone, acknowledging his mistake and blaming himself for not realizing sooner, especially after the incident when I fainted at the hospital. "It's all my fault, please don't cry." He wiped away my tears and placed a hand on my belly. "Stop crying. Negative emotions can affect the baby's growth," he said reassuringly. I couldn't hide my emotional turmoil, knowing that my husband was still in love with his ex-wife, while I was just a substitute. Despite the difficulties, I continued to talk and bond with the baby, promising to be there for them even without a complete family. Focusing on the baby's heartbeat during my early pregnancy, I found solace in the little life growing within me. Eric paused, walking closer, sighed, and then spoke softly. "I'm an idiot for not noticing earlier. I should have understood it when you fainted at the hospital." He wiped my tears away, his hand now resting on my stomach. "Don't cry anymore. Bad feelings will affect the baby's growth." I pushed away his hand, tears welling up in my eyes as I looked at him. "It's all because of someone." "It was me." Eric's apologetic attitude was obvious. "If you want, you can hit me to vent your anger." He held my hand and gently placed it on his face. His face was hot, new stubble prickling against my fingers. I quickly pulled my hand back and teased, "I'm not going to hit you." "I might hurt my hand," Eric said. "I'll massage it for you after the hit." Lily squatted in front of me, coaxing me, "Come on, let's go home." I stood up and started walking, calling him a rogue. Eric caught up in a few steps and said, "Darling, I'll take you home. Is that okay?" I paused, looking into Lily's enchanting face, sincerely saying, "We are already divorced." Erin bent down, meeting my gaze. "Isn't this perfect? We are going to register our marriage this afternoon, all right?" I stood still, completely dumbfounded. It turns out, the time I fainted in the hospital, I wasn't hallucinating. He was calling for me, Lily. But when did he know? I asked him, and he just smiled and kissed my cheek, playing coy. Guess when? The summer heat, willow trees bowing, cicadas chirping loudly, everything was just right. Carrying my 9-month-old belly, with Bella by my side, I was getting ready to buy baby clothes at the mall. Bella scolded me while gently supporting me. I smiled. "You'll understand when you become a mom." As we talked, a person rushed towards us. She wore a duckbill cap and kept looking back. Just as she was about to bump into me, Bella stuck her foot out, causing the person to stumble and fall. The person looked up, and to my surprise, it was Emily. She hadn't expected to meet me here, paused for a second, then clutched my pants leg and begged, "Lily, please, can you spare me? I'm really broke. I don't want to go to jail." I didn't understand for a moment. As I glanced up, I saw several burly men running towards us from afar. Emily quickly got up and hurriedly tried to escape. Bella and I exchanged confused looks. Before going to sleep at night, I sat on the sofa flipping through a mother and baby magazine. Eric came out of the bathroom, then back into the kitchen, placing a glass of milk on the coffee table in front of me. The sound of the cup on the table startled me, meeting his curious gaze. "Honey, this page of the magazine was where you were reading 20 minutes before I entered the bathroom," he said. I looked down, and he was right. He walked over, sat me on his lap, and wrapped his arms around my waist. "What happened today? Tell me." As expected, my distracted mind couldn't escape his gaze. I casually mentioned that Emily hadn't been in touch with me for a long time. Eric's hard hair rubbed against my neck, his lips lightly teasing my skin, leaving a mark until my neck was slightly reddened. Sighing contentedly, he said, "Go on, ask what you want to ask." "My sister said you wanted to send her to jail." Eric's face remained calm, as if he had expected my question. "Honey, trust me, everything I do is for you." I tightened my grip around his neck. "No, I didn't doubt you. Although Emily and I share blood ties, we have no emotional connection. Before, I tolerated her, because she helped pay for Grandma's medical bills. But now, after everything she's done, hurting both me and you, I can never forgive her. Her current situation is a result of her own actions. Even if she ends up in prison, I won't feel sorry for her even a bit." I touched my bulging belly and sighed. "Eric, you know, my life experiences have made me unable to be arrogant, always being bullied. But since I have a baby, I can't allow others to bully me or my baby anymore." Eric's eyes, dark and deep under his dark lashes, then he smiled. "Lily, I'm really happy that you think that way. Eric and I sat on the couch, holding each other tightly, enjoying the warm and peaceful moment. But Eric started moving around on me again, and I pushed him away. Be patient. The baby is about to be born. You haven't told me about your day yet. I pressed his forehead. Tell me. He closed his eyes, cleared his throat, and spoke after a while. Do you remember when you were 14, and you brought a boy who was injured in a fight home? I thought carefully. My grandmother was kind and often took in stray cats and dogs from the streets, treated their injuries, nursed them back to health, and then took them to an animal rescue station. So, I would often bring home skinny, malnourished little cats I found on the roadside. One day, as I passed by an alley on my way home from school, I heard a commotion. Curiously, I peeked in and saw a tall, skinny boy being pinned down and beaten by a group of people. He was stubbornly protecting his head, refusing to give in no matter what. The street was chaotic, and I had seen this kind of thing before. My grandmother had always told me, if you encounter such a situation, it's best to call the police. But try not to get involved. You're still young, and it wouldn't be good if those dangerous people retaliate against you. At that moment, I knew I wouldn't have time to call the police, but I had a plan. I took out my phone, which had a recording of a police siren. As soon as the siren rang, the group of people scattered like rats. I slowly approached. The boy was badly injured, bruises covering his face. He looked so pitiful, no different from a poor little cat. So, I brought him home, as if he were an injured kitten. He stayed at my place for a few weeks and then left very abruptly, only asking for my name. So, the skinny person was you. I shook Eric's arm in astonishment and delight. Frowning slightly, he squeezed my cheek gently. Yeah, I was so sad. That night at the club, I recognized you right away, but you didn't recognize me. I smiled shyly. You know I have face blindness, and back then you looked very different. More like a typical street tough, with your bold style standing out more than your features. Lily's face darkened, giving me a sideways glance. I held back my laughter and threw myself into his arms. Of course, I look incredibly handsome now. I playfully touched him all over and commented, look at you, all muscles now. Don't move around. He suddenly held my wrist. I giggled as he tickled me, pleading for mercy. All right, I'm sorry. You haven't told me about your sister yet. Lily, feeling helpless, straightened my body and said, your sister divorced me and took away 5 million, and then ran off with an unlimited credit card. The total amount is huge. Should I send her to eat free meals? It seems like my sister has completely gone astray, beyond redemption. After a moment of silence, I said seriously, Eric, I won't interfere in my sister's affairs anymore. So, feel free to do whatever you want without worrying about my feelings. When should I consider your feelings, then? Our serious discussion was derailed by Eric once again. I pushed him away. If you don't behave properly, you'll be sleeping in the guest room. No, I'm sorry. As I walked towards the main bedroom, Eric followed me and closed the door behind him. Can I come in tonight? No, you can't. You're so ruthless. Fine, then I'll sleep in the guest room. I sat at the head of the bed and glared at him. Being cute won't work. Later, Eric obediently held me and refused to let go, saying, I love you. Then come in, I replied as he closed the door firmly. Can I ask you a question? I asked, trying to divert my attention. Do you prefer a baby boy or a baby girl? I actually have a baby boy in my belly. I prefer a baby girl, he said without hesitation, resting his head against mine. Too bad. I have a baby boy in my belly. Not a problem. We can have a second child, a third child. Let's stick with one child. Eric suddenly changed his mind. Why? I asked. Because I can't stand to see you in pain. Epilogue. To be honest, I have never been a good person. In high school, my father's affair, my mother's death, and my rebellious nature led to a disaster waiting to happen. I almost beat a man to death, because he spread malicious rumors about my father's involvement in my mother's death. One dark and windy night, he brought a group of people to attack me. Just when I thought I was done for, the sound of sirens scared them off before the police even arrived. Instead of the police, a timid young girl appeared, probably 3 or 4 years younger than me. She was in junior high, old enough to have a defined appearance. She saved me by using her phone to call for help. Embarrassingly, she insisted on bringing me to her home, a place smaller than my bathroom. Without any shame, she undressed me and carefully treated my wounds. When it hurt, I couldn't help but cry out. The girl hurriedly approached me, her eyes shining with the purest light. My grandmother is sleeping. She has to work hard at the restaurant tomorrow and needs her rest. Don't wake her up, she whispered while applying the medicine. She told me she was adopted and her family was poor, but she was happy because her grandmother would buy her watercolor pens to draw with. I couldn't understand why this young girl was sharing these things with me, but surprisingly, I was willing to listen to her, although I was usually impatient. Maybe it was her sweet voice. Perhaps her voice was sweet enough for me to stay in her home for a week, skipping school every day, waiting for her to come home from school, and then going to the stream to skip stones. As I spent more time with her, I realized how despicable my thoughts had become. I couldn't believe I had developed feelings for a girl so much younger than me. My rationality told me I couldn't stay any longer. On the day of our parting, I nervously asked her, "What kind of boys do you like?" She covered her mouth, blushing with a shy smile, almost stealing my soul. "I like gentle big brothers," she said playfully, moving her little fingers. "You don't stand a chance." But in my heart, I thought, not necessarily. There are endless possibilities for big brothers. After that, I changed. I learned about business from my father and quickly took over the company. However, in the lonely nights, thoughts of that girl would often cross my mind, which was absurd. One day, I was convinced by friends to go to a nightclub. A woman who looked extremely similar to her, dressing provocatively and laughing with a group of men, caught my eye. From her expressions, demeanor, and gestures, I knew she wasn't that girl. Her name was Emily, while my girl's name was Lily, a name engraved in my heart. Their connection, an uncanny resemblance, remained a mystery. Occasionally, I would observe Emily at the nightclub, and she would shyly lower her head when she caught my gaze. But I didn't care about her. I was waiting for Lily to appear in my life again, captivated by her delicate frame and slender back. Those men's hands really made me furious. I wish I could just go down and cripple their hands. But I couldn't, because Lily likes a gentle big brother. She doesn't remember me. I'm not angry. She said her name is Emily. I'm not angry. She got married to me using Emily's ID card. I'm not angry. But then, she actually switched back to Emily's identity, and that really made me very angry. How could she tolerate a stranger woman getting close to me like that? How could she be so cruel to cut me off from her world? Later, when I saw her sick in the hospital, all my anger dissipated. What was I after? Just her health and happiness. Ever since Emily divorced me, extorted 50 million from me, and took away my unlimited amount black card, I've been investigating Emily behind the scenes. Emily, besides her misconduct, frivolous behavior, and gambling addiction, she also treats Lily very badly. Her attitude towards Lily is terrible, putting Lily in such a mixed-up and dangerous place like a nightclub, making Lily suffer. Based on these few points, if it were the old me, I might have killed Emily, but for Lily's sake, I just reported Emily for theft, sent her to prison to eat prison food for a few years, and be properly disciplined.